So, the last few days, we've been talking about the relationships between organisms in an ecosystem. And today, we're going to talk about how energy transfers from one organism to another in an ecosystem. And we're going to start reading. And on page 144 from the book, it says, "How does energy move in ecosystems?" There's going to be some important vocabulary words in this that you're going to need to go back and find. So, pay close attention to those important words. So, we start off. How does energy move in ecosystems? Energy can pass through an ecosystem when food is eaten, but some energy is always changed to heat and not passed on. Food chains and webs. Every organism needs energy in order to live. Energy moves to all organisms by processes known as food chains, energy chains, or food webs. Plants, protists, and other microorganisms are producers. Producers are organisms that make their own food for energy. Producers get energy to make food from the energy of the sunlight or chemicals in nature. This food can be then used by many other organisms. It helps me to remember that producers, the word starts with the letter P, and plants, the word starts with the letter P. So plants are your producers. They make their own food. They produce their own food using the sun. In the third paragraph, it says, "Consumers are organisms that cannot make their own food. They usually eat other organisms to get energy to stay alive and grow. All animals are consumers. There are several kinds of consumers. Herbivores eat only plants. Carnivores, also called predators, eat only other animals called prey. Omnivores eat both plants and animals. Decomposers eat waste or dead organisms." That paragraph, pay very close attention to that because there are several important vocabulary words. First of all, consumers. Those are things that can't make their own food. You are a consumer. All animals are consumers. They talk about the different kinds of consumers. Herbivores only eat plants. Carnivores eat only other animals. And omnivores eat both plants and animals. So a human is an omnivore because they eat both plants and animals. Now, humans may not choose to be meat eaters, but we still call the group of humans omnivores. And then decomposers are the things we've talked about before, like earthworms and ants and bacteria that eat on dead organisms and waste. In the last paragraph on this page, it says, "When food is eaten, it is not only matter that moves into another animal. The energy in the food also moves. Arrows in the food chain at the right show how energy can flow through an ecosystem from a producer to an herbivore, a carnivore, and finally to a decomposer. You can see that the energy the spotted owl gets from eating the hare comes from the plants." And we're going to look at that at the bottom of the page. It shows a food chain. So this is an example. Food chains always start with the sun, and then there's an arrow drawn to the next thing that consumes the thing on the left of it. So plants consume the sun. The snowshoe hare, which is just a fancy name for a kind of rabbit, eats plants. The spotted owl eats the hare, and then bacteria eats the spotted owl when it's decomposing. So the bacteria is the decomposer. In this, the plants we know are producers, and the hare and the owl are the consumers. We continue on the next page with the food webs. It says, "On land, almost all kinds of animals' foods can be traced back in some way to plants. In the ocean, food chains often start with plant-like microorganisms called plankton. Food chains of deep sea vents start with bacteria." Deep sea vents are really, really hot, and bacteria is about the only thing that can live near them. Food chains can be very short, involving only a plant and a decomposer. Chains can also be longer, involving more than one carnivore. A food chain is not a complete way of describing energy flow in an ecosystem. This is because consumers usually eat many kinds of other organisms. To see an ecosystem more fully, you need to look at a food web like the one below. A food web combines many food chains into one picture. So if you look at the food web, and you can't see the whole thing because this is just part of the page, but you can start with your producers, which are your plants at the bottom of the page. And then you see the arrow that they're going to, that's the thing that's going to eat that. So we have an arrow going from the plants to the deer. We have an arrow going to the hare. We have arrows going to the squirrel. And then from those first level consumers, they go to sometimes other consumers. So a cougar would eat all of those things. And then maybe something would decompose that cougar in the end, like a bacteria or an ant or slug or something like that, maybe an earthworm. All right. So once you get done reading that, the next page you're going to do is finding what term I'm talking about when given the definition. So for example, it says organisms that make their own food, and an example is plants. If you look back in the reading to get the name, if you can't remember off the top of your head, we remember that producers are organisms that make their own food. So there's a freebie answer for you. Find the other 5. Make sure you look back in the reading for that. When you finish, you're going to go on to the next video.